Today we're here with Matthias. Good morning, Matthias.
Good morning, Victor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Down here in Switzerland, it's always beautiful. I guess you know that. It's like a country you want to go traveling. So yeah, I'm feeling good.
Absolutely. That's good to hear. So I've invited yourself to just have an open conversation about kind of your recent journey going from Notes Domino into the Microsoft world. So I'm really just gonna kind of start asking you a bunch of questions. And obviously I think where we always should start is, if you wouldn't mind, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Tell me a little bit about Salvation Army as an organization. And yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Sure, happy to do so. So I'm the CIO of the foundation of the Salvation Army in Switzerland, Austria, and Hungary. The Salvation generally is a global organization. The Salvation Army is present in, I guess, 130 countries around the world, and they are organized into different territories. And so Switzerland, Austria, and Hungary, they form one territory. Why it's exactly like that, I don't know. I think it's a historical thing. But probably what's important is we're a global non-profit organization. And I also know that we're probably Microsoft's biggest non-profit customer. We have around 120,000 Microsoft Office 365 licenses. So we're pretty big on a global scale. But today, we're mainly going to talk about the foundation in Switzerland, and we're roughly 2,000 employees. And we're working in the social field. That means we run social institution, we childcare home, facilities for people that otherwise would live on the street. But we also have thrift stores where you can buy secondhand clothes. And of course, we also run churches all around Switzerland. So that's mainly the business the Salvation Army is engaged in.
Excellent. I mean, it's a terrific organization in my opinion. So for how long have you been at Salvation Army? If we start there.
Good question. During my studies, I started to work for the Salvation Army. Then I was also an exchange student in Australia. That was more than 10 years ago. And during that time, I also figured out there's also a Salvation Army there. So I continued to work for the Salvation Army in Australia. I came back and suddenly the Salvation Army in Switzerland asked me to become their head of IT, CIO, and that was 10 years ago. So in my role, I'm now more or less exactly 10 years.
So in that first role as an IT manager, did I include learning Lotus Notes?
The thing is, during my studies, I was working as a Notes developer for different companies, and the Salvation Army was one company who needed a Notes developer. So that's when I started to work beside my studies for the Salvation Army, as a developer. And at that time, I developed the tool that helped us to organize patients within our social institutions. So the whole medication thing, the documentation, everything was in Notes Domino. And that was like my major or main project at that time. And that's how I came in contact with the Salvation Army.
Wow.
So I think I know Notes Domino really from the basics.
Yeah. So for how long? So I assume what kind of Salvation Army were probably already on Lotus Notes when you joined. Do you know when they first decided to go for Notes? That's probably called Notes or Lotus Notes or Notes at the time.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
People still call it Lotus Notes. So I think it was around 2002. The Salvation Army decided on a global scale that they would choose Notes Domino as their communication platform and also collaboration platform. Mm-hmm. So that was in the year 2000, and then they had a global rollout over all those 130 countries. Yeah. And so I think roughly 20 years we worked with Notes Domino. Then we also tried IBM Connections. So that was the logical step, but suddenly it came to an end. So at around, I think, 2016, 17, 18, around there, people were really asking questions. Is that the right platform for the futures? Do we still have people, skilled people in that field? Is it possible to find resources in that field? Because slowly IBM was going away. Microsoft with their whole cloud platform, especially Office 365, really took over the market. So that's when people started to think, should we probably change?
So would you say that was the main driver, or was there other drivers behind, such as, I don't know, saved costs by going to the cloud, or productivity increase by using the entire Office suite, or like, were there other drivers as well, or was the main driver kind of the increasing lack of resources and skills?
I think there are a couple of drivers. I think two of the main drivers were, the first one was if you look at people's working place, you see different working places, but what you always see is people use Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word as their text processing program. That's like everywhere you go. And then we figured out, if we already pay the license to use Microsoft Word or Office, we should probably leverage that capability. Decided that we should, from a financial perspective, move over to Office 365 because we already had those licenses. And definitely from a user perspective, everyone loved like Outlook. They were more familiar with that from their private usage sometimes, or also when they came from another organization or another company, they already knew Outlook, Exchange, and all that. So we decided that we would go that way. Then the other thing was also all the Domino servers. They were around the world still on-prem servers. And we wanted to get rid of like most on-prem infrastructures in our country. So it was also kind of an obvious move to say, okay, we go now over to the Microsoft Cloud platform. And finally, I think it became more and more difficult to find resources, skilled people who still know all the tricks in the Domino world. So I think these were the main drivers.
I think that makes sense. And I think that, to be honest, it very much aligns with what we tend to hear from most customers. And kind of staying a little bit on that topic. So you made a decision around the 2016 timeframe. And then I assume you started migrating the email, as most customers do. So did that go on a global scale, or was that done country by country or region per region, or how did you go about that?
So first we had some early adapters. So some territories, mainly in the United States, they started to move over to Office 365 earlier. The majority actually moved after 2020, moved over to Microsoft Office 365. And in our case, I have to say, we started the project 2019. We ended the project just right before the pandemic. So it was just
good timing.
Perfect timing. It was really, we ended in December 2021, 2022. I think 22 it started. And we just migrated over. We had teams. Before we didn't have any like common collaboration platform. So that was just amazing timing.
Yeah. So what was and that kind of leads us into the next phase as well. So what was the main reason? Also, you migrated to the mail, people started using Teams and Outlook. So can you talk a little bit of kind of transitioning from that over to the application side of things?
So like many other companies or former Domino clients, we had around 100 databases, some of them still in use, some of them just an archive. And we were looking at the market to figure out a way how we could bring that data over to the SharePoint platform. And that's when we discovered that AdaptTech could be that solution or that solution partner who would help us to bring that over, because we didn't have the skills. And we thought that for a one-time project, we don't want to build internal skills to migrate things. So that's typical something you want to get or buy from the market.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense. So what was the main reason from your end that you were looking at moving it to SharePoint? Was that because you already kind of had it in place, or was it because of other reasons? Like, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that in terms of the decision of target platform?
Mainly, we decided earlier that we would have two strategic platforms. One would be the SharePoint, let's say SharePoint team thing, and the other platform is ServiceNow. And we had to figure out which of those two platforms would serve better for certain needs. And most of the, let's say, document libraries in Notes Domino, they go quite well into SharePoint. And of course, there are also a lot of migration tools available to help move or help that with that step. So that's when we decided we didn't want to lose all that knowledge or all that data. So that's when we decided we just going to transfer it to SharePoint.
Yeah, and I assume, especially again being on the Domino platform since like early 2000s, I'm sure you had all of that like important data in there, and it's also probably like I said, most customers, and this is what we tend to see, is like when you already have Exchange and you're running Teams, SharePoint just becomes a natural kind of option.
Absolutely.
One.
Yeah.
So I think that makes perfect sense.
For example, we also have an intranet solution based on Microsoft SharePoint, which is also connected with ServiceNow. So using the intranet and searching for documents, if you have the documents on that platform or on one of those two platforms, they just show up in every search. And it was obvious that we didn't want to have an additional platform. It makes sense to leverage the possibilities in those two universe.
Yeah, and 100%. And I assume it also kind of aligns with a little bit what we talked about before in terms of like skill sets and resources. I assume that just leveraging SharePoint or anything really which is in the Microsoft 365 platform allowed you to kind of tap into your existing resources as well. I kind of assume.
Exactly, they're all interconnected tools. Yeah, and that's the strength of the platform.
So what was the biggest, shall we say, requirement or challenge as you kind of went through starting to look at the Domino applications?
So from our experience and what I also have talked with our Notes developer who was mainly involved in the project, is that not every database is fit for the migration process or for the standard automation migration process. So we had to figure out first which of the databases could fit and work with the migration process, and which of the databases needed either to be redeveloped or probably also needed to be replaced by a totally different product. So doing that selection, I think that was challenging, and also I think it's the key. So only then you can figure out which databases work and which probably not. So some of them, I think we also had a discussion with you guys if that could work or not. And I also remember that for some databases we then added some SharePoint features afterwards. Yeah. Which I think came from the standard. Yeah.
Because there is, I mean, generally speaking, I know it was the case in kind of your situation too. It's like it's very rare where you find the one-to-one between the platforms. So it's typically, and it's, I would say most in my experience, like Domino can more or less be whatever you want it to be, and it depends on like how creative have the Notes developers been over the years. And then when you start to look at that, it's quite often you find ERP-related databases, and then you find CRM-related databases, and then you find internet-related databases and document management systems. Like you find all of these different sort of categories, and then when you start looking at where could it go, obviously a lot of it, and I know in your case quite a lot, could go to SharePoint, but then there's always going to be some of the applications where it's more realistic and more, I would say more probably optimized to start looking at other target platforms as well. I think that makes perfect sense. So are there any kind of lessons learned that you can share from kind of the initial Notes to SharePoint migrations that the organizations have gone through?
So what I think is really important is to have like a partner who understands both worlds, because what our experience was is that sometime the migration worked, but then the data was over and we didn't know what to do with it. Now we felt like things were missing, but not like because they failed through migration. They were missing for other reasons, because probably that function was normal in Notes but didn't exist in SharePoint. So having like a partner with like AdopTech who knows both worlds and who was then also able to like add or develop some tiny parts also in the SharePoint world, I think that was key, and that really helped us. And then like with all the projects at the beginning, you have some struggles, things don't work as expected, but the good thing is usually don't have one or two notes databases. You have the chance to learn the further you go down the road. So so that was the experience. And then the other thing also is once they're migrated, you need to explain to the users how it's working in the new environment, that things have changed, and you also need to have the users on board. You can't just migrate it, send them a link and say it's done, because usually, since we moved over to the platform recently, people are not familiar with SharePoint yet. So just sending a link doesn't help. You need to show them, look, before it was like that, now it's a little bit different, colors have changed, it's not the twisties from the notes view, it's a little bit different, but you'll figure it out and we'll explain and help. So I think that's important.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's a key point, like just managing that change, especially going from something that I know users have potentially been using for years or even decades. Like change is hard for most people, and I think managing that is a really crucial part of any given transformation project. But in to be specific, like going from Domino into the Microsoft world. So where have you seen the most kind of hopefully positive feedback in terms of from the users? Is that to be able to, as you said before, access the documents straight from Teams, or is that to be able to search from the intranet, or like can you maybe point out one or two of like where you've seen the best end result in terms of productivity and just general user feedback?
Okay, so I think I have to be honest, the thing is not very emotional. It's usually the data comes from one platform to another, so people are not going to get excited about that. So it's not really changing their life. So so the thing is, we don't have much feedback. Like people is more like, okay, it's here now. So but of course, from an IT perspective or from my role, what I see is that soon we will be able to shut down all those servers, Notes Domino. The thing is also that the data is now in one place, and of course people can find it through the intranet. It's also now, I think in the latest, if you use Windows 11, like you see the latest documents you worked on. So everything is more interconnected. So that's something, but it comes step by step. So like there's not like a huge benefit at the beginning, but the benefit will show over time. And of course, from a TCO perspective, we're gonna save money once we have moved over. So that's an important thing.
Perfect. So I mean, the last question that I have prepared beforehand is, and it has not that much to do with Notes and to SharePoint specifically. So if you look right now, kind of in the market, what are some technology trends that you're the most excited about?
Good question. I think I can't mention AI now because everyone mentions AI at the moment. Of course, but that's the big thing. People talk about it. People are afraid. People are excited. It's really the thing that triggers emotions. You have examples you can use. You can see how videos are generated automatically, photos, all those kind of things. So I think that's the thing. We need, first of all, I feel we need to get that under control somehow, and then there's so much potential also. And also having moved over to Microsoft being a big investor in OpenAI. So it's really things, I think we're on the good path. Not sure if the whole thing only has good things in the end, but we'll see. Of course, that's exciting. And then like moving things to the cloud, from my perspective, also is very helpful. But that's already an old topic, I guess. Yeah. But it gives you just more flexibility and yeah. So
I think it's an old topic from like having it on the roadmap, and some organizations, or a lot of organizations, kind of starting. I think it's still very relevant, because I would dare to say that very few have been able to move all to the cloud, or maybe everyone won't. But I think it's still very, very relevant, to be honest.
Yeah, I think also it's like a big part now of every IT manager. It's not a future technology; it's here. So
yeah.
So I think
totally, and it's getting better day to day, really, in terms of security, in terms of productivity, like all those things. Yeah, I think it's still an exciting area, even though it might not be considered new anymore, as you said, but it's still an important area, I think.
Absolutely.
So Matthias, big thank you for the trust in Adoptio, first of all. Big thank you for taking the time to have a quick conversation about kind of you as an organization, what you've been going through and are somewhat still going through, and the drivers for that. So thank you for sharing.
No worries. Thank you very much for the partnership. We really appreciate having experts on our site. So thank you. And so hopefully we'll finish those leftovers the next couple of months, and then we're done. So thank you very much.
I'm sure
Victor.
we will.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.